Welcome to This Way Up, the podcast dedicated to supporting parents and caregivers navigating the complex world of mental health. I'm Andrea, and each episode we dive deep into the conversations that matter, exploring the challenges, triumphs, and transformative journeys of those facing mental health struggles within their families. Whether you're here for expert advice, inspiring stories, or just a little boost to get you through the day, we've got you covered. So grab a cup of coffee, kick back, and join us as we find the bright spots in the mental health journey, because we're all climbing our way up together. After today's conversation, you are going to step into the role of CEO of your family. If you're like me, that concept kind of gives you pause or even gives you a little bit of anxiety. But after our conversation with Janet Krebs, who is a speaker, author, and family facilitator on this whole concept, you will feel the confidence in stepping into this role as she discusses the three most important things you need to set that foundation and what you can do in practical steps to get yourself into that CEO position. She also talks and addresses the challenges that many of us have with high needs moments and sometimes high needs children, and taking that CEO role and maybe being a little bit flexible to meet those needs of those kids. So I hope you enjoy today's conversation with Janet. And if you did, please hit the subscribe button and share this with anybody you think that could benefit. Thank you. Good afternoon. Today we are joined with Janet Krebs. How are you, Janet?
I am fantastic. How are you?
I am good. This is going to be a very fun conversation. I know it. I can already feel it. Janet is a speaker, author, and family facilitator. She helps families adopt a leadership mindset and empowers them to cultivate confidence and self-reliance in themselves and their children. Bravo, Janet. This is why you're here today, because let me tell you, when we've got kids that require a little special attention, you need to have confidence and you need to have a lot of leadership. So I can't wait to dive deep into this. She has enjoyed a rich career in consulting, human resources, and education. She spent over 14 years as Commander Krebs in a space flight simulator where she impacted over 60,000 students. Side note, we are going to have a conversation on that because I am curious, and that sounds like amazing. So we may just start with that one because it's so cool. She is a 2-time best-selling author and earned advanced degrees in human behavior and development, counseling, psychology, and in education. And when she is asked what her greatest accomplishment is, she will answer without hesitation, her 2 adult children, Benjamin and Elisa.
Absolutely. 400%. You nailed it. Yep.
Awesome. Okay, can we take a little side note here? I got to understand. Space flight simulator, I would imagine that probably falls right in line with parenting.
Well, I was a teacher for the Reader's Digest version of that is. I was a teacher for 20 years. I retired myself. I didn't get myself in trouble. I retired myself. We all know what has happened in education in the last 20 years or so. Anyway, blessed beyond measure. 14 years of my educational career was in a space flight simulator. Challenger centers are all across the country. Actually, they're all across the world. And here in my home state of Indiana, I was blessed to work in one. So I was Commander Krebs in the suit 24/7. And the coolest thing about it, Andrea, is that the simulation itself, like it was so realistic. Like I would have kids actually pee their pants because they thought they couldn't leave the spacecraft. Okay.
Oh, bless their heart.
And like 6th graders, right? Like who have to change their clothes in the spare clothes that we kept. Right. So it was very realistic. The curriculum kind of taught itself. I was able to facilitate the curriculum, which thankfully, very early in my teaching career, like year 6 or 7, I learned that I was much better at facilitating curriculum rather than standing in front of a classroom and just regurgitating curriculum. So that it was a perfect fit. And I learned a lot about parenting in that simulator. So it was not for naught. It just really paved the way for so many ahas.
Well, I am so curious about how you have focused your latest career move, I should say, on leadership and confidence in parenting. What led you to focusing on that?
That's a great question. And I think about it all the time because there's so many ways that I could answer that. The what, like what happened, and nobody cares about my story per se, except that I am a huge Simon Sinek fan, and he's all about leadership. And when I listen to all of the leadership gurus out there, John Maxwell, Simon Sinek, there are many to name. I got to thinking one day, it's like, there's a bridge here. Like, this isn't its own, like, why do we only speak about leadership in corporate America? Because leadership really transcends into many of our roles. And I got to thinking every time I would hear checklist, top 10 leadership skills, top 13 leadership skills, how to know if you're a great leader. Every single time I looked into all of that data, it pointed to anybody who is a parent, role model, influencer, coach. Like, I don't want to say just because you've birthed children or you are a mother or a father. Anybody who has influence over a young child is in a leadership role. And so I just decided to call it to the carpet and have devoted my entire, like this chapter of my career to not convince, but to draw the bridge for people to understand that you don't have to look any further than just right in your mirror. You are all your kids need. Step into the role. You've got it. Step into the role and you'll ace it.
Well, let me tell you, I was in management for several years when my children were young, and that's like parenting. So clearly the skills are transferable. Absolutely. So you talk about the CEO. I'd like you to explain to a mother or father who does not picture themselves as a CEO of their family. What does that mean? How can they change their image of themselves to being that CEO of their family?
Well, I'll tell you how you can't do it. And that's with the snap of a finger, right? Yeah. Like, it's just like, and everyone's looking for the quick fix right now. So there's some mindset training that we can do and some exercises and stuff. But here's what it's not. Let's just go there first, if you don't mind.
Sure.
I chose this mug very intentionally. Hopefully it comes across.
It does.
Because everybody today is looking to social media of whatever your platform of choice is, and everybody's got an influencer that they follow.
For those of you not watching, hold up that again.
I'm sorry. Yes.
It says property of an influencer, and then it says powerful, and I can't read what it says underneath.
You know what? I don't have it committed. Powerful professional.
There we go. Okay.
Powerful professional. And so I love this mug, and I use it when I'm interviewed most of the time because it brings that concept home. And that is, you don't need to look outside of yourself. Like, you're not going to find the answers on Facebook or TikTok or like any of those platforms. Look within first and then get like some real solid help. Coaching, advice. Don't stay off of social media. The influencers of your world are not the ones that have 5 million likes or followers on TikTok. They are perhaps people in your own sphere. Maybe if you're religious, it could be a clergy or somebody that you know, or a mentor, or find a coach or whatever it is. But stop looking out there on social media for the so-called influencers. You've got this.
One thing with that is, I think to be a good leader and to be impactful to anybody is you've got to be authentic to yourself. And if you're trying to copy what some of these influencers are doing, you're not being authentic to yourself. You're not coming up with your own why and your own way of speaking. And I think that would be hugely, you're absolutely right. I don't think I've ever thought of it that way, but you're absolutely right.
And you called out specifically, like, it's hard for parents to think of themselves as the CEOs of their family. I would challenge that. I mean, I know I'm not supposed to swear, but I call bullshit. I'm just going to call bullshit to that, because who is making the financial decisions, the logistical decisions, the medical decisions, the nutritional decisions? Every single decision that is made in a family is typically made by someone in charge, probably a mother or father, or if it's an aunt or a grandparent, whoever is responsible for parenting. So you are the chief financial, chief medical, chief logistics, chief education, chief nutrition. You are the CFO, COO, CEO of your family, whether you like it or not.
Right.
Like, that might make you uncomfortable, but we have to remember that when we said yes to bringing this child home, however it was conceived, or, whatever the circumstances are, when you say yes, those are your responsibilities. And it can be the greatest joy, and it can be the greatest joy. Like, yeah, I know you were expecting me to say something the opposite, but it can be so great. Is it going to be easy all the time? Of course not. Are you going to have challenges? Of course. Any CEO of any corporation doesn't have all the answers. You're not expected to know everything right out of the gate. But organically, and with some help and some research and some trial and error, we learn how to do it. We're the bosses, we're the CEOs, whether we like it or not. So you might as well step into the role and just own it. And when you look in the mirror, just say, I mean, how empowering is that to just, instead of saying, I'm just a mom. How many times have we heard this, right? People, a stay-at-home mom. Like, why does that even have a label?
Right.
And mothers shrink when they say that. It's like, I'm a mom, rather than hands on hip. I'm a mother, right?
Right.
I'm a grandmother. Like, I'm responsible for, come on. I mean, we're talking about transferable skills. Women make the best bosses.
Yeah, they really do.
They do.
Not to say that men don't make great bosses either, but women are very empathetic. We know how to read one another. It's almost in our DNA, right? So I bring this back to, we've got, our podcast really addresses listeners that may have children who struggle with mental health issues, or, any kind of really struggle.
The whole gig is hard.
It's hard. It's hard. And I think, you think you got it figured out, right? Your kid's 5, 6, 7, you've been doing this, you're rolling along and you're like, okay, I got this out. And all of a sudden you're hit with a curveball, and that just takes your self-confidence down, right? Like, all of a sudden, I don't know how to deal with any of this. I don't know what to do. And I know when I was hit with it, my kids were a little bit older, they were 11, is that I just got knee deep and just tried to figure out what I could learn. And the best thing for me was trying to learn from other people. And that helped me gain my confidence. And I really do think that when I was put into that position, that it gave me confidence because I had to do something that I didn't do. But at the same time, it put me into that, it made me realize what a significant leadership role I played in the family, because things weren't easy. They were difficult. And I had to take a stand on things.
And great segue. And what you just described in the digging deep and figuring things out and learning and researching and asking and remaining curious and trying some things to see what worked and didn't work, and all of that gave you competence, because you tried some things and some things worked. And so that's how we build competence, right? We try a new skill, and when we've mastered it, or at least have seen some success, then we feel competent. Well, what breeds confidence? Competence.
Sure.
Right? So
Yeah.
if we rewind, like, how do you get mothers who don't feel confident? If you do 4 successful things a day within your family as a mother, you have competence. How could you not be competent? We don't focus on our wins nearly as much. We focus on what we didn't get done, or what didn't go right, or all of that. So sorry for I segued you off. I derailed you a little bit.
No.
Because that answered that question. How do parents do that? Focus on what your competencies are and then give yourself some grace and credit, which builds your confidence. So back to the derail of what happens when life goes sideways on us. I think number one, we have to expect it.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. It's never a smooth train.
It's just not linear. And boy, would it be boring as all get out if it was, wouldn't it?
Sure.
We expect it. But are the rules really any different? Like, we assess, we remain curious, and we identify now what what is it that I'm actually dealing with? And what would my next benchmark or vision that I have for this to be? So, if it's a medical, we obviously want that to be resolved and or cured or at least managed. So there's lots of things but what's just the next one step? What's the next, not down the road. You want to have a vision, but you also just have to give yourself some grace and manage it one step at a time.
Janet, that is probably the best advice ever, because I know for myself, and I think for a lot of other people, especially when we are raising little humans and we know how hard and tough life can be once they leave home, that we jump 10 years down the line and start thinking, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? And we forget about all those little steps, all those little learning opportunities that make them stronger in between now and then. And sometimes when we jump to 10 years down the line, we become paralyzed in our thinking because we don't know where to go.
Sure.
That is excellent advice. It's just think for the moment. And when my son was, 2.5 months maybe old, he was not sleeping through the night. Oh my God. As probably many of our kids didn't. He would only sleep.
2.5 months, I don't think they're expected to.
Oh, well, with my first, I thought they were, because I was going back to work full time at 4 months. He was going to be 4 months old and I was going to go back to work. It was before we had all these great benefits that they do now. And I remember being stressed out, how am I going to get back to work? He's not sleeping. I'm only sleeping, 10 minutes, it felt like. And my husband had a coworker who had a child that was 3. And his response was exactly what you did, which was, he's 2.5 months. Of course he's going to be sleeping by 4 months. And I thought, that's only a month and a half away. And guess what? By the time he was 4 months old, he was sleeping through the night. And things change so rapidly with kids. And being agile is important. And then just being grounded and knowing what you're doing right now will be that next layer for them to grow and be better.
Yeah. It's the same thing with potty training, right?
Oh, yeah.
My child is struggling with potty training. I don't know of anybody who's ever graduated high school that wasn't potty trained.
Yeah. Except for maybe that 6th grader that was in your flight simulator. I'm just kidding.
Well, yeah, but that's different because
kidding.
I provided them such a realistic experience that they really thought they were in space and there was no place to go.
Hey, you talk about the 3 C's. Can you go into a little detail about what those are and how those are important when you are the CEO of your family?
Yeah. And so your listeners are probably, I'm going to kind of contradict myself ever so slightly with the first of the 3 C's, which is create a vision, because here we're talking about one step at a time, right? And the timing of your question is perfect, because I was almost going to disclaim that with balancing with a vision, because leaders always know where the ship is going, or at least they have a vision, or they're creating a vision, right? So there's a balance between what you're dealing with and also what the vision that you would see either for your family as a whole or for your child, i.e., what's a great example? Well, today, actually, we can use a great example of today's kids where, I don't know about your area in San Diego, but here in Indiana and in a lot of areas in the Midwest and the South, high school sports is huge, right?
Yes.
And
yes.
it's the big push and it's competition everything and travel this and my kid going to get a scholarship and blah, blah, blah. Like, that's cool. If that's your path and all of that, I'm not saying don't have that. But what happens if that vision is so narrow that the child doesn't get the scholarship and then they have to make another decision? So you've created such a narrow vision that, that kind of derails. Or let's say I'm an athlete, which obviously I'm not, but I'm a dad and I'm an athlete, and my son is going to get the football scholarship. But my son wants to be an artist, has no interest. So whose vision are we creating? One that's accurate and in alignment with the skills and the talents of your own kids? Or is your ego creating the vision? So creating the vision takes a little finesse, and the vision changes, obviously, because it's not linear. I always knew that I wanted kids that would leave and leave that metaphorical nest. And I'm not embarrassed to say that. And so at a very early age for them and early in our parenting experience, I stopped doing things that they could do for themselves so that they would learn how to do things for themselves. That was just a decision that I made, but it was part of my vision of making sure that they knew how to do things for themselves when they left the metaphorical nest. So I make no apologies about it. And actually they're, now they're 27 and 31 and they can do all of that stuff. And my son is a fabulous cook. So that's really terrific. So things like that. So C number 1 is to create a vision in alignment with the kids' personalities, talents, and strengths. Did you want to make a comment before I go further?
No.
Okay. C number 2 would be communication. And for me, communication is huge. I'm a huge communicator. I love effective communication and I love streamlining communication. And when it comes to communication in kids, again, you got to match where they're coming from. For example, parents of today are probably struggling in 2024 with technology. So coming through the door, here's just a beautiful example of how we have to kind of change with the times. The kid comes home from prom, doesn't matter whether it's son or daughter, comes home from prom, and you're anxiously awaiting the full report, right? Like, what happened? Did you have fun? Blah, blah, blah. Who'd you see? How was the food? Did you dance? All of this vomit and the kid comes in, they're just like, fine. They don't want to talk about it, right?
Well,
So how do you make that bridge? Because they're teenagers. I don't want to come in. And so maybe they don't want to come right in and download everything that's in their head. So is it realistic to say, maybe tomorrow at breakfast, you'd be more willing to fill me in on some details? I respect your space. If it were my daughter, she'd be so peopled out because she's an introvert. She'd have to go hide in her bedroom. So again, with communication, we have to know who we're talking to and with and align our style with theirs.
It's interesting. One of the things that has recently come up for me is I think our generation is more of two-way dialogue, right? We're just, and in person. And the kids, obviously, because of technology, just aren't that way. And I've come to realize that I send out information, mainly via texts now, and don't expect anything in return. That was because I would, I'd send out stuff and I would expect them to come back with, talking to my kids. Send it out to my kids. And I would expect them to come back to me with acknowledgement or engagement in conversation. And that doesn't happen. And so then I would assume that they weren't reading it, they weren't retaining it. And what I came to realize was they absolutely are. They're absorbing it, but they're absorbing so much information that to get back to me is a communication style that's important to me, but not necessarily something that is in alignment with the way that this next generation communicates, because I think they get so much information back at them.
And yet, I still value and I still endorse that being able to communicate face to face is never going to go out of style. And we are seeing a lot of kids who are socially uncomfortable or socially awkward because of a lenience or a reliance on technology. And I think that is just the biggest mistake. And I think that's where parents can make a role. So I'm not saying that you in this case, but you could say to your kids, please acknowledge that you got this, right? And so even if they gave you a thumbs up or something, because that's just letting them know that common courtesy of communication is a two-way. If it's a boss, they're going to have to learn to respond whether they like it or not.
Absolutely. And I should say that it is two-way. It's not but there is so much information out there that we're not going to have deep conversations about everything that's sent through. That was probably the biggest thing. And the second side of that is that where I thought that maybe they weren't even getting it is that they are actually, it's just that they're reading about it and they're processing it much differently than I process.
Yeah.
I'm a talker, I guess. Maybe that's the bigger thing is I'm a talker and they're not. But actually they are. But anyways, and now I'm going back and forth. Okay.
And that actually goes back to what I was going to say next was about we need to understand the personal style of our kids. In my work with families, I am a huge endorser of, I work with a version of DISC that has actually been trademarked to use with families.
Oh, interesting.
So that we can understand the personality styles, which often, always will give us clues as to the communication style of everybody in the family, right?
For people who don't know what DISC is an assessment of skills and traits and personality and all of those things that a lot of corporations use to help facilitate relationships within the organization, right? And understand yourself. So that's interesting that they came out with something dedicated to families. Go on.
Not they. One of the women that I work with rewrote it herself, had it trademarked and approved by that corporation.
Oh, interesting.
And so I joined forces with that because it's just brilliant. So for example, if you're a dominant, right, but you've got a very supportive child, that's not going. So that's the D, dominant, and then S, DISC. S would be supportive child. Like that communication style isn't always going to be, because dominants are drivers, my way or the highway, and supportives are just not that. You're going to turn them away. So not only is it how we communicate, but understanding who it is that we are communicating with. So that's more than just a single pronged C in the 3 C's.
One thing that has come up so often throughout my episodes is this premise that behavior is a form of communication, and that kids that are misbehaving are oftentimes trying to communicate something. So I would think with that whole communication thing, if you've got a child that is struggling somehow or misbehaving. Now, I'm not as generous with that when I think of somebody who's 17 or 18, but younger children, is finding out what is driving that behavior, because maybe that communication is not coming out verbally for you to understand.
Right. And we have to remember, this is a little off tangent, but it's very fitting here. We don't remember. Well, okay, I'll be very personal. I'm 60. I don't remember fearing the world. My world was real different, right? I mean, I could talk to my ice cream man. I actually used to get in the truck with him and drive around the neighborhood and hand out ice cream. That would never happen today. My world didn't feel scary. Getting up in front of the class to say something, that was scary, or having to raise my hand for times tables. Kids today, like, the world is frightening.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times they're just reacting in fear. And we also have to remember, side note, we could talk a long time on this, so we won't, but when there are no boundaries or loose boundaries within their world, whether it's the family or school or whatever it is, when the boundaries aren't clear, that equals fear. God, that was a riddle. That's a writing downer.
Good thing that's recorded.
And so oftentimes I believe that kids that misbehave, it's sometimes coming from because they're fearful, because they're scared, they don't know what the boundaries are, and so they misbehave to test what those boundaries are.
Well, and getting back to your whole principle of a CEO and being a leader of your family is having those established boundaries and that confidence in yourself in establishing those boundaries is going to transcend to your kids.
And so for anybody that's out there listening and says, or said at the very beginning of this episode, I'm not a CEO, like we're not even talking less than an hour, and you've already able to draw all of those connections right back to CEO-ship. So congratulations. Like you just gave everybody permission to pull all sorts of examples of exactly that. Yeah.
They only hire the best here at This Way Up. Best and brightest.
Absolutely.
Now, I will say that parents that have either special needs or high needs children, that sometimes those boundaries need to adjust even sometimes on a daily basis. So I think being very aware that those boundaries exist, but sometimes they can fluctuate just a little bit depending on what is occurring, even on a hour-to-hour sometimes basis with kids that are high needs like that.
Yeah, and with kids that have, and first of all, can I just say, in my opinion, every kid is a special needs kid because they all have special needs, whether it doesn't matter what they are, they all have special needs. And that's why we have to meet them as much as possible where they are. With kids who have, let's just say, if we're going to use the word, special needs as a form of disability or something, it's still meeting them where they are.
Yeah.
Right? It's still understanding where they are. And my other big shout out to those parents is it's not a reflection when your kids misbehave, let's say, right, out in public or do something that is, and people are looking. It has no reflection on you.
Right.
That's
Absolutely.
not you. That's it. Like, take your ego out of it. You're a mom doing the very best you can. You're a dad doing the very, very best you can. It doesn't mean that you are anything other than a parent doing the very best they can, a grandmother doing the very best they can. So just take your ego out of it and stop thinking that everybody's looking at you and judging you and if they are, poo-poo on them.
Yeah.
Get over it.
Absolutely.
Get over it.
Absolutely. I want to go back to what you said about special needs, by the way, because there are kids that are special needs from day one, but then there are special need moments, I think,
Absolutely.
with all kids.
I love that. Yeah.
And I would say that I would say highly needs, that there are moments with our kids that maybe they're going through something that's creating a lot of anxiety, or they're going through a situation where they're feeling extra sad, and I hesitate to say depressed, but it could be depressed. But there might be special needs moments where you need to have different parameters for a highly needs time.
Absolutely. I love that. And that's true for any kid. You know what? That's true for me.
I was going to say for me too. I have high needs moments a lot. Let me tell you.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, we all do, because life isn't fluid. It's very demanding. Yeah. And there is a lot that we are challenged with and by. So of course there's going to be special needs moments. I love that. Can I steal that from you?
You can steal it. Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to steal it. I'll just borrow it. And I'll just give you credit if I ever use it in another book. Yeah, it's good.
Okay. So we've got creative vision and we've got communication. What's the last C?
The last one is connection. And I don't want the listeners to be thinking, oh, that's like, I can't do that. My child is whatever. Connection can be free, and you don't need a PhD to do it. A super simple example. After all the lunches were packed, I didn't do it. The kids finally did on their own. I would sneak in and replace their napkin with one that I had written a note on. And if nothing else, it was just a heart, which when they got to a certain age was mortifying. And I enjoyed it even more. Or a bite of the sandwich, right? Because then they'd be like, my mother bit my sandwich, but
That's hysterical.
I just thought it was funny. Right. I thought it was funny too. But see, that's just a little unspoken connection.
Right.
Like it doesn't have to be a big deal. Just a Post-it note.
And that connection is so personal to you.
Exactly.
Right? I mean, like the bite out of the sandwich, that probably imprinted on both of your kids' minds. Like, yeah, that's my mom. That's my mom. You know, every morning I would wake, if the kids were hard to wake up, I would turn on the music so loud. And I always had a specific song, which I'm not going to, at least for a year, I had about a specific song that I played. And I won't repeat it because the kids will be mortified. And I would sing and dance until they had to get up. But those kids, that's what they think of now. They think, okay, mom, crazy, but loved me enough to make it fun for me to get out of bed in the morning.
Exactly. And that's why, like, sometimes people, like, if I'm working with a family, they'll be like, well, give me some examples. And so then we can come up with some, but it would be well, it's not pointless, but like, it is so individual that I almost hate to give tons of examples because viewers and listeners are probably like, oh, I could do this, or, oh, that would be so fun. I could do that, or, you know, whatever it is. I mean, just silly things, but there's no book on how to connect with your kids because it's real personal. It's just you and your kids. And it might not be the same for each of them.
Right. Well, that's a great point. But it's your own leadership style. Again, getting back to CEOs, you know, every CEO builds their own culture. You're building your family's culture through unique connections and such.
Yes, thank you. Because family culture equals legacy, of which I am a huge fan. Mm-hmm. Because when we create our vision, oftentimes assigned or attached with that is a version of what that legacy is. And so that was beautifully timed. Right. It's like we rehearsed this, but we didn't. We didn't. Organically unfolding. This is great.
Well, you know, I just have to say, this is, again, I have too much personal stuff here today, but so before I had kids and became a mom, actually even during I had kids, but I was in the workplace and I loved it. I loved everything about it. I was in business. I enjoyed all of that. So hearing you tie parenting back into business, it's just like making all my connections, you know, work in my brain. It's like a beautiful place to be.
I spent about 10 years I worked for a consulting firm and I did a lot of resumes. It was kind of like a headhunter firm and for executives. And I did a lot of resume creation. And I learned that so early in my career, right out of grad school. And so I've always been anchored with the transferability of things. So like transferable skills, transferable anything, which is how I think one of the reasons why this came to me so easily, because these are just another example of transferable skills. And really, you know what, Andrea, if we think about it, isn't life very transferable?
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, everything we do can be applied, which is why resume writing shouldn't be that hard. Because, and especially like stay-at-home mothers, stay-at-home parents, you guys are the easiest because you've got
right. You got a whole laundry list of stuff.
You've got a whole laundry list of skills. So yes, you are correct.
So you've got a parent that is a little uncertain. They've been a parent for a few years and they now want to take the reins and become the CEO of their family. I know you've got a whole protocol that you work with people on, but in a snapshot, what's one thing they can do today to help them take that step forward to being the leader of their family?
Just do it.
Like Nike says, just do it.
Like Nike says, just do it. Because that first step, okay, let's back up for just a second. If you've not been having that posture within your family. How much fun will it be when you actually assert yourself, convince everybody that you're actually for real? Like, I don't know about you, but I do have a certain endearment towards being disruptive. I just think it's fun. I've always been a nonconformist. And families, people within families who are willing to be a little disruptive and just stand up for the first time and say, no. I'm like, I'm serious right now. Like, that's not going down. Like, this is for real. That disruption, A, will get everybody's attention, and B, you will have everybody understanding who the new chief is. And they're begging you to take control. They are begging for somebody to take control. And mother, or whoever it is, mom, dad, grandmother, aunts, whomever is the leader of a particular household, kids are so begging to know who they can follow, and better you than somebody on social media.
Okay, I think that just sums it up very, very well. Janet, we're going to have your contact information in the notes and everything, but real quickly for people that are listening and just want to jot it down, how can they find you? And real in a bubble, what can they expect from your services?
Well, they can expect a little disruption, but a lot of the thing is that we want to empower parents so that they can do it themselves with confidence and competence. And it's really just making that bridge. So, I mean, I'm so easy to find. Just my name, janetkrebs.com. You can go to parentshifts.com. That's surprising, right? Shifts. Make some shifts. Parent Shifts will give you some downloadable fun things. And just do the work, or just reach out and get started. You can do this. Like, anybody can do this and have fun doing it.
That's right. You just need to believe. You just need to believe.
That's right.
Thank you, Janet.
Thank you so very much.
Thanks for tuning in to This Way Up. I hope you're feeling a little lighter, a little brighter, and ready to take on whatever comes next. Remember, the journey of mental health is all about progress, not perfection. So keep climbing. And don't forget to celebrate the small wins. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who could use a little lift.